Hey everybody, Jeff Tidwell here with another one of my tweet videos for you today, going all the way back to March 2019. That is 7 months ago, so we are time traveling here. Of course, as always, you can find me on Twitter at RealJeffTidwell. I'm also on Gab. Try their Dissenter free speech web browser and the Dissenter.com website for putting comments on any URL online. Of course, I'm also on Minds.com, and I'm also on Parler and Telegram, Instagram, and if you're not watching this video on BitChute, you're watching it on YouTube. So definitely like and subscribe if you will, and hit the little bell below for notifications. Please leave me a comment below with your thoughts and observations, criticisms and accolades alike. I look forward to corresponding with you. And of course, if you find my cadence to be a little bit on the slow side, you can hit the 2x speed button and get all of the information in half of the time. Of course, time is the currency, and that is double bang for your buck. It's a good deal. Try it out. And so without further ado, let's get into some tweets for today. It is October 6th, 2019, a Sunday afternoon. Let's relax and get into some material. So I'm going to start today with a bit of a warm-up. I did take last week off for family-related reasons, so I'm going to get a little warmed up here with a named tweet that I call Top 10 Associate or Top 10 Associate. And I'm not going to really explain this. It's just a number of associations, and we'll go from there. Aware, intelligent, adaptive, freedom, liberty, choice, ethics, principle, morality, truth, absolute, singularity, logic, reason, science, chaos, entropy, destruction, order, syntropy, creation, objectivity, neutrality, balance, authority, religion, control, passion, purpose, love, peace. So there's a couple of different versions of this tweet. The other one is called Associated Press, but I decided to organize these 10 sets of 3 associations together. They correspond with my other tweet, Based 10, which we covered on my last tweet broadcast. So if you'd like to look into that, we can certainly, I'd certainly be down for discussing it. But for this video, we're not going to explain the connection, but you might be able to find some if you happen to look into it. So that's definitely something extra there. And so I'll move on to my next named tweet, and this one we will actually break down, which is usually what I do in these videos. So there's 2 different versions of this tweet, but I'll start off with this one called Appealingly Persuasive. So we're going to talk a little bit about philosophy and persuasion today. I do not purport to be a persuasion expert, seek subject matter experts, but I do enjoy the topic. I am learning every day, and I enjoy talking about it with you. So leave me a comment below with any of your thoughts on philosophy, persuasion, or anything else that floats your boat. And we'll move on here to appealingly persuasive. Kairos, or Kairos, is the appeal to timing, opportunity, urgency, and agency. Ethos is the appeal to authority, law, ethics, and people. Logos is the appeal to reason, logic, science, and evidence. Pathos is the appeal to emotion, irrationality, imagination, fear. So ultimately you have K-E-L-P. So I say, kelp me, kelp you. Kelp me, kelp you. So that's how that started. And then the next named tweet will do that all over again. This tweet is called Kelp Me, Kelp You. K-E-L-P. All right. So back to Kairos is an appeal to timing, opportunity, urgency, agency, and action. It is an appeal to action. Ethos is an appeal to authority, law, ethics, people, and credentials. Logos is an appeal to reason, logic, science, evidence, and math. Pathos is an appeal to emotion, irrationality, imagination, faith, and fear. So, like I say, seek subject matter experts. I'm not an expert on philosophy, but again, it is a topic I do enjoy discussing. And when you're talking about philosophy, there are some very, very basic concepts. In fact, I talked about these on Twitter a few months back, and somebody said it was high school level. I don't really hear these in regular dialogue, but it's helpful to have a system for breaking down the types of arguments, debates, and, things that you're having. Like what arguments are you making in a debate, and how are you looking to persuade? So we'll start off with Kairos or Kairos. That's K-A-I-R-O-S. The appeal to action. So this is when you're trying to persuade people. You're trying to get them to act. So you format your argument that way. You're trying to get them to do something. You might be presenting some sort of danger or something, and saying, well, you have to act now. Act now. There's an urgency. They want you to take agency. They want you to act with a sense of time. So I say timing here. And, of course, opportunity. So if someone's trying to sell you a product and they say, well, act now, that is a Kairos or Kairos. I don't actually know how to say it. Like I said, seek subject matter experts. There are certainly a number of philosophers online, and, of course, all the old ones from thousands, hundreds of years ago, and so forth. But, yeah, knowing what these terms mean could prove beneficial if you don't already know. So that's using timing, opportunity, urgency, agency, action as a way of persuading and winning you over to their argument, or getting you to act in the way that the presenter, the speaker, wishes. So now we have ethos, the appeal to authority, law, ethics, people, and credentials. So this is how you present something with an ethos-based argument. If you're going ahead and pointing to, well, it's an appeal to authority. You're appealing to, for example, the experts, or somebody that has some sway over a situation, someone that should know better. You'd be making an ethos-based argument. You'd be appealing to law. You'd be appealing to rules that have been set. So you'd say, well, it doesn't matter if it makes sense. It doesn't need to have logic. That would be logos. It doesn't matter if it feels emotionally right. That would be pathos. And there's no sense of urgency or timing, so there's no kairos. But you're just saying, look, here's the law, okay? And this is how I intend to convince you or persuade you, or some would say manipulate you. We'll talk about that later, to do something, or to change your view, or to make their argument whole, to make it complete. Okay. Ethics, of course. So we're talking about, again, morality. It's an appeal to morality. It's an appeal to the way things should be, the rules, the way they should be. Ethics, not focusing on the logic again or the emotion, but on if it's moral, if it's ethical, if it's, about, again, it's about the rules, about the structure. You'd be appealing to, you'd be saying, well, we're doing this for the reason that it's ethically sound, that it matches with the way that we should be doing things. Of course, an appeal to people, you're appealing to the experts. And again, I do say, seek subject matter experts. And leave me a comment below if you know any good philosophers or persuasion experts. But it's an appeal to people, who they are. A guilt by association would be an ethos-based argument, saying, well, this person is either this mutable characteristic or this immutable characteristic, and, well, that's the appeal to people. And of course, you'd look at their credentials. You'd appeal to their credentials, their what their education might be, what their background might be. Again, mutable or immutable. But in the case of credentials, you're talking about a mutable characteristic. Mutable being something that they learned or something that became part of their character, became added to their credentialed background. So they have some sort of title. Potentially, they might have a title. They might have a degree or a certificate. They might have something that gives them a bit more sway, a bit more leverage when they're discussing whatever topic it might be. If you're talking to somebody who might be trying to sell you something to do with home repair, you'd want to get a licensed contractor, somebody that's credentialed, and that's how they would win you over. They'd say, well, look, here's my credentials. Or if you're talking about something a little bit more intellectual, you'd say, well, here's my degree. I have a doctorate in this, so here's my credential. And that's why you should listen to me and not that other person on this topic. I have my credentials. Or you could listen to both of us. You could listen to both of us, but again, credentials help you win people over to your argument. Logos, of course, is straight down the middle. You got logic, reason, science, evidence, math. So people that are more scientifically minded would say that, want to make logos-based arguments more often. And, you just appeal to the underlying logic of the situation. You'd focus on reason over looking at who the person is, because looking at who the person is, of course, is a ethos-based argument. You'd focus on what the factors are. You'd use the scientific method, and you'd really try to narrow down what is true and what is false, and then work from there using logos. People might use things like statistics. They might use empirical evidence. They might use scientific evidence. That might show an experiment. They might say, well, this always this always happens when we put this in this together. So that's it's showing off a scientific truth as the argument. And economics, again, another almost, these are sciences. Anything that appeals to the science, that appeals to how things work, that would be a logos-based argument. Just the underlying logic, the math, as it were, the evidence-based, science-based, logic-based arguments, reason, being able to reason. This is all, of course, the logos-based argument. And then when you're trying to persuade people using pathos, okay, you have emotion, irrationality, imagination, faith, and fear. These are all different tools that you'd use that are pathos-based. You try to appeal to the human side, to the emotional side of somebody. You try to put a little fear into them. You try to appeal to their faith. May it be like a religious faith or perhaps a modern religion, which can be even for the devoutly secular. But yeah, you'd appeal to their irrationality. So logos appeals to rationality. It appeals to that, nuts and bolts, gears turning scientific mind. And then you have pathos, which kind of focuses more on the slightly irrational, the more, and again, we are irrational beings. All 7+ billion of us are irrational beings that are grasping for reason at all times, grasping for order and rationality in our lives. But pathos, of course, is a way to pulling the heartstrings would be a pathos-based argument. And then, of course, appealing to imagination. Again, we're going to talk about persuasion in a moment, but appealing to imagination, like letting you conjure up the images in your head that that might persuade you to this person's argument, that they're using pathos. That's another part of it. Faith, imagination, and of course fear, and other emotions such as making people feel shame, making them feel guilty. These are very powerful, actually, in terms of political persuasion. People change their opinions oftentimes very much based on their emotions. That goes for all of us. We change our opinions based largely on our emotions. There is a through line, a backbone of logic to many of our decisions. We think there's logic, and oftentimes there is, but really a lot of it's pathos-based. It's how we feel about something. Does it make us feel good? Does it make us feel bad? So a pathos-based argument would try to work on emotions more than logic centers. It wouldn't focus on association or the person there as an ethos, and it wouldn't focus on an appeal to action, getting you to act urgently. It would just be focusing, and again, usually a good argument will have one, two, well, I'd say two, three, almost all of these integrated into it. So you'd have some urgency to act, and then you'd also have some pathos in there, and maybe some ethos. I am credentialed, I am an expert, and I'm telling you, listen to my argument. There's ethos, and of course, putting some logic in there, putting some science, putting some evidence in there to tie it all together and make you go, oh, well, there is objective truth to this. There's something to this that isn't, it isn't just faith-based, it's evidence-based. So that's Kelp Me, Kelp You. So we'll go on to another tweet that talks more about persuasion. And this is another tweet. So in this time period of March 2019, and even now, I have taken an approach with these named tweets. They're usually a little higher concept than some of the other tweets that I have. They're, a little bit conceptual art, but they try to make a point as well in that framework. And sometimes I actually made two versions of the same general tweet with the wording changed and the title changed. So we're going to read these two right here. They're called All Bases Loaded, All Bases Loaded, and Big League Chew. You know what I haven't had in a while? Big League Chew. So there's some Family Guy for you. Okay, so we'll start with the first tweet here. Big League Chew. In the free market of ideas, having a refined persuasion game is a clear advantage. A knowledge of when to throw a curve, drop a bunt, walk the other team, or swing for the fences. Study persuasion if you'd like to be a pitching ace, or at least somewhere in the ballpark. The sister tweet to this is called All Bases Loaded, and I consider All Bases Loaded to be the refined version of Big League Chew. All Bases Loaded. In the free market of ideas, having a refined persuasion game is a clear advantage. A knowledge of when to drop a bunt, throw a curve, walk another team, or swing for the fences. Study persuasion if you'd like to be a pitching ace or somewhere in the ballpark. So, once again, not a persuasion expert. I am learning every day. I'm an acolyte of those that have come before me. I actually watch Scott Adams, who wrote a book called Win Bigly, which described a lot of different persuasion techniques, including those that President Donald Trump used in part to help win the 2016 U.S. presidential election. And there's other people that I could list as well, Gialdini and so many others. In fact, I have a friend, X808, he's on Twitter, X808Beats. on Twitter, and he actually has a pinned tweet at the top of his profile called the Master Persuader List. Some people call them wizards, some people call them persuaders. Again, we're going to talk about persuasion just a little tiny bit here and talk about how framing matters, using different words matters. But he, X808, threw together this list, and it's got some excellent people on there: Dale Carnegie, Steve Jobs, so on and so forth. Dozens of names, really. And this is a good starting point, so if you're interested in the topic of persuasion, check out his list. And you actually can look on Google or DuckDuckGo as well and find lists of people that know persuasion. And from there you can kind of study different styles and get some tips and tricks. But we'll go into a little bit of why I think persuasion is an important skill to add to, as Scott Adams would say, your skill stack. It's like part of your talent stack, I guess you could say. I know there's stacks in the world of programming as well. I'm not a programmer. I'm more of an advocate, I guess, of the... I'm not an engineer. I'm more of an advocate and an artist. But persuasion is incredibly important to not only, professional, personal, philosophical, political. It really has an application in virtually all aspects of our life. And I find that those that don't seem to study it, don't seem to understand that there is a system, persuasion, there's an art form, there's a science to persuasion. When they're discussing things online, like politics, they don't see that layer. It's a good filter. I think Scott calls it the persuasion filter, that he puts over situations, and it can kind of help you develop a more predictive sense of what's going to happen. So persuasion, again, people will talk about it in what it is, in terms of choosing the right words and formatting how you're communicating, framing how you're communicating with people. And it can go for, again, all kinds of fields, such as sales. People talk about persuasion in sales because you're trying to get people to do something. So that also brings up the other thing I wanted to say about persuasion, because everybody seems to, whenever I say, oh, I like persuasion, I'm studying it, I'm trying to get better at my persuasion, I'm trying to level it up, I'm trying to buff it, almost like you're playing an RPG and getting better at the conversation paths. And if you play like Knights of the Old Republic from way back in 2003, or Mass Effect, or any of these, you can get your linguistic skills up, and then that's kind of, charisma, persuasion. And there are lots of people that use it for different purposes. We talk about the MyPillow guy. I don't remember his name, but I guess he's running against Ilhan Omar in Minnesota for her seat. But he has this way of communicating, it's almost like you could almost file it away. If you were looking at it in a professional context, you could almost file it away as like a people skill, like getting better at it. But people always do bring this up to me. They say, so you want to persuade people. You want to manipulate them. You want to manipulate people. And I say, well, hold on a second there. Persuasion can be for positive reasons, or it can be for negative reasons. I always say that persuasion and manipulation are a two-sided coin. You have persuasion and manipulation. You don't want to manipulate people, but you want to win them over. You want to sell them something. May it be a product, as in the case of most sales, or an idea. So if you're a philosopher, if you're a political pundit, if you're somebody that's on Twitter and trying to make a name for yourself, giving political opinions and philosophical positions on things, having a good persuasion game will really level you up. I say study it. I'm just trying to study it every day. I don't expect to ever be a true expert. Even the greats are learning something new every day. But I think that it's a valuable and underrated skill, because I never really thought about this until a couple of years ago. And learning all the different techniques of how to win people over, how to pace and lead and get people to think the way that you'd like them to think in the pursuit of that goal, to make them use their imagination. Give them a choice and let them, you know, make their own decisions. Of course, it taps into our human agency. But also, if you have two people selling the same idea or the same product, two people, one of them knows persuasion and one of them doesn't. Well, the person that knows persuasion has a better way to present positive options to you know, I think that the think positive movement is a large part of this as well. You don't want to make people feel bad unless you're trying to scare them into choosing something else or choosing something specific. You want them to feel good about their choice. You want them to have a choice. So I think choice actually is a very important part of persuasion myself, where you're not forcing something down somebody's throat. You're slowly but surely persuading them to your, you know, it might be an ideological goal. You might be trying to sell something. But yeah, people, you want people to start to think past the sale. You want them to imagine, you want to create images in people's heads. That's a large part of persuasion. I'm kind of spitballing here. Like I said, I'm not really an expert, but as I think of things, I tell you on camera. Creating an image in somebody's head. And really what persuasion is about for me, what I see largely as the mechanism, the science of it, is just learning how to frame things better. Not to frame them in a way that's like duplicitous or any, you know, trying to hide things, but just framing them better, helping people think better about a specific topic. I mean, it can and again, it can have extremely positive benefits, extremely positive effects, I should say, on people when persuasion is used for something that benefits them. So it shouldn't be seen as like just manipulating people to use them, to sell them something, but also to help them learn and understand their own ability. In fact, that's why I talk about persuasion. I talk about it partially because I think that, you know, when you don't know about persuasion, when you don't have this filter, when you aren't aware of these systems and how humans interact, and you know, it's essentially a science. It's very predictive. If you're not aware of that, you're at a disadvantage. Like, when you're trying to discuss politics, you know, we talk about all the political stuff on this channel here. There's this level of awareness that I didn't have before for many years, and I'm still working on it. I don't feel like I'm quite there yet, and it's really hard to get there. But again, without persuasion, without understanding how this works, what makes people move, and just looking at it as like bluntly, like the issues. Well, the issues are one part of the argument. The issues are, in a sense, your logos. You know, you actually want to get physical, malleable things done in politics. But politics is largely a post-truth realm, which what I mean to say is that it's a linguistic realm. There's a lot of, you know, people say politicians lie, or politicians frame things a certain way. The words you use, the order, you know, a news article puts their paragraphs, everything is a form of persuasion. So we all kind of know a little bit about persuasion from the outset, but when you look at it as an art form, when you look at it as a technique for improving your communication skills and helping make yourself more charismatic and helping, there's so many different benefits you can get, and also being less of, let's be honest, of a sucker. You don't want to be at the mercy of people that are great master persuaders, or wizards, as some people call them. I think Owen Benjamin calls them wizards, among many others. You want to be in the game. You want to understand the nature of what's going on and understand this system. So I do recommend studying persuasion. Definitely, I hope to inspire a few people to check out a book or two, or just read about it. Read about the techniques of persuasion. I try to study it as much as possible, and I figure it'll be a positive thing here to help get you on board that as well. because in the free market of ideas, having a refined persuasion game is a clear advantage. So many ideas, so many people trying to persuade you and I across the board, and yeah, having a better persuasion game will bring people in. They'll feel more comfortable with you, and again, I think it's better to be transparent about persuasion, which is what Scott Adams does on his YouTube channel, Real Coffee with Scott Adams, where he talks about persuasion and talks about how the news persuades, how the media persuades, how the modern religion of institutions persuade us, as well as everything else. You need to know when to drop a bunt, throw a curve, walk another team, or swing for the fences. So some good persuasion, of course, is also getting people to think, to ask questions, to raise questions, to create an image in their head of a situation, to frame things, and then make us ask questions. If you have any thoughts on persuasion, please do leave them below. I'm still learning every day, and I figure just to get a little bit of a primer on what persuasion's all about would be nice. But I have a lot to learn, so please do leave a comment below. Yeah, knowing when to swing for the fences, knowing when it's a good move. This is what 3D and 4D chess are all about, by the way. That's right, folks. 3D and 4D chess, you might have heard those terms. You might be well acquainted with them, but learning this system of the chessboard, of linguistics, of negotiation, learning how to negotiate correctly is a persuasion area. Negotiation, persuasion, they're essentially the same thing. So if you'd like to be a pitching ace, you might not be the best persuader ever, but at least having this tool in your toolbox could help you out. And especially online, trying to make arguments, you want every advantage you can get. So on to our next tweet. I actually have a couple of fun little puns here that I'll run through. They're both named tweets, but they were pretty much one sentence. First one here is called Surname Surmisal. Smith picked up steam, partially due to the creation connotation. Smith? Creation? Yeah. Okay. If you have any thoughts on that, leave a comment below. The next one is called Disneyfied Office. Disneyfied Office. You put white gloves on him, and President Trump is about as brandable as Mickey Mouse. The Disneyfied office of the president. Very brandable. The big blonde hair, the big red tie. He has a nice blue suit. And of course, Trump being brandable is... everyone knows what brandable Trump is. He puts his name on his towers and so on and so forth. But I thought that pun was cute. So. Alright, so here is another tweet. To take action on others based on their microaggressions is what I would consider to be a macroaggression. So, we have these things in the world of, how do I put this? Safe space culture and culture of nice, and some strains of the modern religion that is known as social justice. The politically correct world, they're called microaggressions. You might know about them. There is several major articles about this, but this is basically when you're talking to somebody or you're working with somebody or dealing with an individual and you're doing things that are, they're almost subliminally oppressive. They're microaggressions. You're not giving heed to the feelings of somebody that might have. Again, if you go into the whole PC social justice warrior world, where if you say almost anything, it can be it can be about an immutable characteristic, it's always framed or filtered through as being about immutable characteristics, such as, race, gender, sex, and so on and so forth, things that we can't change about ourselves. Somebody will say, say if I say I'm critiquing a white person, I might be critiquing a white person, and then somebody will say, how can you critique, of course, me being white, I can't do this, but they'd say, why are you critiquing this person? Isn't that racist because they're white? I would say, no, it's critiquing them because they're a human being. We're all human here. And yeah, I was looking at their argument. I was looking at what they were doing. I was looking at the content of their character and not their immutable characteristics of their race or their ethnic background, their heritage. But microaggressions are just these little tiny things that people don't even notice. Like, for example, it would be a microaggression if I said, hey, everybody, I'm doing this symbol here. It's called OK. The OK hand gesture. And somebody might say it's a microaggression to do this because, well, to them, in their head, it's something offensive. It's oppressive. It's doing something. Now, what's happening, the reason why it's a macro aggression, not a micro one, when people take action on others based on microaggressions, when they try to take people's jobs, when they get into cancel culture, I have a new video out. Cancel culture is cancer. Check it out on my channel. When they start doing things, getting litigious, they get into legalism, they get into trying to help people lose their jobs, lose their apartments, lose whatever it might be that they value in their life based on microaggressions. Doesn't happen often. I'm not saying this happens often, but yes, it does happen. And it would be a macroaggression because trying to control the hand symbols, hand signals that people use is authoritarian by nature. It's simply authoritarian. It's trying to control people. And when you start saying, well, microaggressions, you're doing things that you're not even aware of. Now, of course, you should tell people if they're doing something that makes you uncomfortable, right? But in this world of microaggressions, there's so many just all these little things, and they say, well, you're more privileged, so you don't understand, you don't quite get it. And they start pointing to all these little tiny things that nobody would ever notice. And then saying, wow, you're kind of a monster, but you don't even know it. Of course, I say here, taking action, taking legal action, doing something that has an effect in the real world, the tangible world, based on a microaggression would be not a great idea. And worrying about microaggressions is, of course, an authoritarian thing to do. Trying to control the way people act, the way people speak. PC, it's all about PC. I was actually listening to a little bit of Noam Chomsky talk about PC. And PC has evolved since the 80s and 90s. It has, again, it's like the inertia. The inertia of PC just keeps on going and going and going and going and going until it hits a counterforce. And that counterforce is in the form of people like Jordan Peterson and the anti-social justice disciple movements. Where people say, enough is enough of the intersectionality. Enough is enough of the identity politics and the collectivist ideologies, the social and cultural Marxism. I know the real Marxists out there, those that appreciate his work, don't like using Marx in connection with PC. But of course, putting people into groups, as they do in the intersectional feminist world, putting them into groups based on their immutable characteristics, and then judging people based on that and saying that they're the oppressor or the oppressed, they're down here, and they're being oppressed if they're in this group. And then there's all these different intersections of different groups that might be oppressing each other, committing micro and even macro aggressions on each other. To me, it's just the world created by political correctness is one where you're always looking out for a problem. You're looking around and looking for people to be projecting some kind of hate, but really it's you. It's you or me, whoever's pointing out all these things, that's really projecting, redirecting the hate that we feel. Again, we are irrational beings. We have these irrational emotions, such as hate and fear. And, you know, sometimes people think that everything has to do, instead of looking at science, instead of looking at economics, instead of looking at all these different, you know, situations that have causality, cause and effect, they say, well, everything is just hatred, intolerance, fear, bigotry. You're a racist. I'm a racist. Everybody is a racist. That's another video I have out. Everybody is a racist. / moral panic is a modern religion. It is. Check that video out on BitChute and on YouTube. I talk a little bit more about the guilt by association, the guilt by conversation, and just pointing to people and saying, you know, well, you're committing this crime. Whether you know it or not, you're maybe too privileged to know it. Again, it gets into the mind reading, it gets into projection. It's not very conducive to dialogue. So definitely don't take action, based on microaggressions. That would be a macroaggression. Okay, so here is a tweet that I've done other videos and other tweets similar to this topic, but we will go through and talk about terms permeated with stale skunk. Grifter, hate speech, Hitler, lying politician, female wage gap. So these are your terms permeated with stale skunk. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to start here with grifter. I'm a grifter. You're a grifter. What is grifting all about? What is this grifter thing we hear so much about? Scott Adams was talking about this too. It's actually been an ongoing joke. It's one of his favorite words. Because, you know, people will say, it goes back to the making those appealingly persuasive appeals. And you point to somebody and say, well, I'm not going to argue their logic or their evidence or their argument. I'm just going to point to who they are and say, that's a grifter. I'm putting a label on them. I'm making an association. And that's really the argument right there. That's an ethos-based argument. They're a grifter. Well, are they grifting? What is grifting? So grifting, you know, the way that I view a grifter myself is by looking at somebody that might be seeming very opportunistic, kind of like a used car salesman or saleswoman, where they're clearly in this for like a financial, a fiscal incentive, a money-based incentive, and they don't really believe in what they're saying, but they're trying to get people's money, to get people's attention, trying to become famous by sort of parroting whatever they think is going to sell them the most, you know, get them the most attention, sell the most product, get them the most donations. A grifter is somebody, again, that, you know, tries to find a financial incentive, and, you know, it's used as a pejorative term, so I'm not sure if there's an exact, like, you know, pinpoint definition for it. But that's kind of the gist of it. Somebody that's just manipulative. They might be persuasive, but they're also manipulative, and they're trying to make a buck off of this newest craze. That's kind of what grifter is all about. And so people will point at you and say, well, you know, with me, I don't monetize my channel, and I say words like Nazi every video. So it's hard for me to be a grifter. In fact, I do have a video that tells you Jeff Tidwell is a grifting, gaslighting fraud, but that is satire. That is satire. I talk about that. But grifter, yeah, it's just used to shut down conversation. It's just like Nazi, or it's just like misogynist, or racist, or sexist, or any of these terms that, you know, these terms that get thrown around, and then you have to look at the person and go, well, are they this thing? You know, with grifter, it's one of the most insidious of the labels you could throw at somebody, because you're going to somebody and saying, well, you're a grifter. But are they trying to make money? Like, you have to go through like all the different, go down the checklist of all the the things that would make them grifting. You know, are they just really good at what they do? And then again, like, are you going to begrudge somebody that's very persuasive and happens to make money while also informing people and having, you know, having a product, having something that has merit to it, that has, like, you know, you're actually paying for something that you enjoy. And yeah, they could, you know, like, where's the line? Where's the line between, again, I feel like I'm not necessarily neutral on this because I do not monetize. I do not put ads up on Twitter. I just make tweets and videos like this one here. But where's the line between, like, a grifter and somebody that's just good at what they do and has a career and wants to make money? Like, it just shuts down dialogue. Definitely covered in stale skunk, I would say. Even though there are grifters out there, it's like, I think that there are grifters out there. There are people that are opportunists and they're manipulative and they just want your money. That's true. Keep your eye out for those people. But I think that it can certainly be overused. Kind of like gaslighting. In fact, that's the other two tweets that were connected with this one were terms scented with kale vapor. Check that video out on BitChute and YouTube, as well as the terms found in clouds of peach green tea. Yeah, check it out. The next term is hate speech. Now, this one I wasn't sure if I should include at all because it doesn't really exist. It's arbitrary. You determine what hate speech is. I determine what hate speech is. And in fact, you and I both determine what free speech is as well. And now hate speech is something that people use when they're saying, well, someone said something offensive. Now, some things are more offensive than others. When you have this, for lack of a better term, wanton racism, wanton otherism and sexism, when you have people that are very clearly trying to hurt somebody, there might be some hate in there. All right, there might be some hate in there. But then again, people also use all kinds of different terms, different words. I'm not trying to defend those that use slurs. If you use a slur, let society decide. Let other human beings decide. I'm not the one that's going to tell you if it's right or wrong. That's not what this channel is all about. We are both sidesists here. It might be right. It might be wrong. The people will judge it. The people will decide. And that's what hate speech is all about. It's about people deciding if something is hate speech or not. It's an arbitrary decision. It's a choice of somebody. An authority figure might say something is a hate speech term or a hate speech sentence. But in my mind, it's so malleable. It's so adaptable. This term can be put on any statement, almost anything that's critical at all. They'll call it hate speech. It can't be hateful conduct. You know, Twitter recently wanted to put a warning or put a suspension on what's his name? He was just at the White House. Terrence, I forget his last name, but Terrence is a comedian that's on Twitter. Check him out. He just went to the White House, and they were trying to get him for hateful conduct because he was being critical of Democrats that were trying to impeach the president. And much like this channel, he has, you know, Terrence, he has a, let's call it Trump positive message. So, you know, this is what they do. They'll say it's hateful conduct to go, they'll say it's anti-Semitism to go after Adam Schiff, little Adam Schiff. They'll say it's anti-Semitism because he's Jewish. And that, like I was saying earlier about that, like if you point to somebody and criticize them, and then people say it's racist or it's anti-Semitic or it's sexist based on these immutables, right? Now, Judaism isn't necessarily, it's a religion. It's not really a mutable, but then there are the Jews, which is an ethnic background, so it is kind of, it actually is an immutable characteristic. But that's just, again, that's the persuasion of it. That's the framing. They say, well, you're making fun of somebody that happens to be this. They happen to be a man, so you're being sexist against men. They happen to be white, so you're racist against whites. They're black, so you're racist against blacks. They're Jewish, so you're anti-Semitic. They're Catholic, so you're anti-Catholic. That's not reality. That's framing. That's manipulation of the dialogue to make sure that the argument gets shut down one way or another. The claims of anti-Semitism will shut that dialogue down. So hate speech is something that gets used more as a weapon than, and it's not anything that can be strictly defined. In fact, the First Amendment of the United States Constitution does not define hate speech. And really, a lot of terms of service don't actually define it either. So it's another term that's covered in stale skunk. Pepe Le Pew, you could say. Just another malleable term. Hitler! Now here's a term that's not malleable. Well, actually it is, because everybody's Hitler. There is this again, you can leave a comment below with what I'm talking about now. There is this idea of like the Hitler policy, or the Hitler inevitability, or whatever it's called, where they say like every argument on the internet, it's like so many degrees from a Hitler reference. Hitler is always just beyond a couple of more sentences whenever you're trying to get to the bottom of why something happened. Or somebody will say that you're like Hitler. Oh, you're being a Nazi. You're being a fascist. Fascist has become really popular. That, I believe, might be one of the terms scented with kale vapor. But they'll say you're Hitler, or the president's Hitler, or whoever it might be is suddenly this totalitarian, fascistic, anti-human figure because they disagree with you. So they say Hitler. You know, whenever I have actually seen people that end the conversation right there when Hitler is mentioned, because it's such an easy reference. It's almost like, oh, you're just like Mussolini, you're just like Hitler. You know, you're not really killing tens of millions of people or causing all these problems. You're not invading Poland. But hey, you might have the slightly wrong opinion on this one thing that I disagree with. So you're Hitler. Hitler has been thrown around so much. It is almost a malleable term that we can just, you just throw it at somebody. It's a grifter. Throw Hitler at them. And no, I don't want to call it anti-intellectual, but it does kind of indicate that you're not firing on all cylinders. You're a little bit out of ideas if you're making Hitler references. Every time someone does something wrong, you're making a Hitler reference, and especially if you're referring to the President of the United States as Hitler. Orange Man Hitler just doesn't fly off, doesn't roll off the tongue the way that I believe it should. So that's another one of those terms that if you get that, if you hear Hitler and you're not hearing it in the context of World War II or being the Chancellor of Germany prior to the war, dying in the bunker, being gay, whatever it might be about Hitler, his family life, his belief system, his ideology, the National Socialists, any of the real Nazis, the real like 1940s, 1930s Nazis. If it's outside of that context and you're seeing Hitler, and it's a serious discussion, like not a joke, not satire, it's like someone trying to really make a point, the odds are they are permeated with stale skunk. So that's one to avoid. Next one, lying politician. Lying politician. As if there's a distinction between politician and lying politician. Not really. Some politicians are more truthful or honest, intellectually honest than others. God bless Bernie Sanders. I hope you are feeling better after your mild heart attack, Bernie. But, he's one of the... He made it his brand, Bernie Sanders. His campaign's over. It's over. It's unofficially over. I would be very careful with making donations. And again, I think it is a very emotional time right now, so I don't want to be too... I'm not going to go after Bernie Sanders in this video, maybe a future video. But I don't see the need anymore, because when somebody has a heart attack on the campaign trail, that's all, folks. That's all, folks. he had a bit more honesty. Like, at least, you know, his ideology, his policy positions are far-fetched. They're difficult to achieve, but at least Bernie seemed, you know, on the outside. Most of the persuasion experts I talked to, the body language experts I talked to, say that Bernie is telling the truth. To his knowledge, Bernie's telling the truth. And yet, even Bernie, even those that are a little more intellectually honest and less lying, fall into this world called politics. And as one of my videos says, check it out on my channel, politics is a post-truth realm. So, lying politician, literally when I was a Bernie supporter, and I was, in 2015 and 2016, I was a Bernie supporter. And everyone was talking about how he was different. He actually said the difference between me and Hillary Clinton is we're telling the truth. We're telling the truth. And I was in this mindset where I'm like, not all politicians lie. But it depends on how you're framing the term lie. Like, if someone tells a little bit of an exaggeration, is that a lie? Is hyperbole a lie? Is directional accuracy a lie? I've talked about that in the past as well, but I'll talk about it again. I mean, it's all about how you'd like to define this term lie. If I say, for example, you know what? Hey, YouTube and BitChute audience, I'm going to go ahead and get us all 7 ice creams. Okay? 7 ice cream cones. All right? And it's going to be great. And then I come back with 6. Well, in a sense, I was lying, but I was also directionally accurate. Okay? Like, I did get ice cream cones, and I got a lot of them. I said there'd be 7, but instead there were 6. Technically, it's a lie. Sure, you could cast it, you could frame it as a lie. But in politics, you know, it's all about directional accuracy. President Obama said that change is glacial. As long as you're moving, and I think this is the way most Americans see it as well, as long as you're moving in the right direction, you're doing a good job. If things are trending in the wrong direction, whatever that direction might be, well, people see that. They see the economy slowly sliding down the hill. And sometimes you need a little hyperbole. You need a little positivity. You need a little speculation to get economic markets moving. Okay, you need optimism. And sometimes optimism means telling somebody in a wheelchair that they're going to win the Olympics someday. And they very well might. They might win the Special Olympics. They might achieve many accolades and beat all the odds. But in the reality, you're trying to encourage that person. You're trying to give them positivity, to give them energy, to help them achieve whatever they can, whatever their goal might be, whatever they want. But you are kind of, in a sense, lying to them. You're lying to them, but it's understood like, oh, I understand that you're telling me something that's probably not true. It seems like an exaggeration. It's hyperbole. But is it really a lie? Do people hold them to that? Or is it seen more as like a little white lie? Or is it seen as just a means to an end, trying to push the person into a better place to help them get from point A to point B? Is it a lie? So, but lying politician, I mean, if you're going by any standard, they're always lying. Okay? President Trump has made an art form out of the hyperbole, out of the exaggeration, out of the big ask. Another part of persuasion is the big ask. Bernie Sanders made 1 billion of them in 2016 when he was asking for Medicare for all and all these different things that, you know, I would say, yeah, it's good for us to really try to hit it out of the park and you know, have all these good ideas. But then most people were telling me, well, you got to be more pragmatic. You can't, like, tell the people that they're going to get, you know, raised taxes on the millionaires and billionaires and socialized medicine and free college and no more wars ever and no more drone bombs. Okay, Obama dropped 26,000 drones in 2016 alone, and I think President Trump dropped in the area of 30,000 in 2017. If Bernie Sanders were elected president, which he unfortunately won't be due to age and having a heart attack, and also, falling in the shower, I don't want to hit the Bernie supporters while they're down, but I mean, let's be honest, guys. Okay, let's be honest. I was a Bernie supporter, and reality hit me in the face when he lost to the worst politician in history, the worst presidential candidate in history, Hillary Clinton. So I just want to keep, we're on this channel and on my Twitter and everywhere else, I try to keep it as real as possible. There's some metaphysical stuff. There's getting into crazy philosophical concepts and weird framing of different things. But at the end of the day, I'm just trying to keep it real. Real Jeff Tidwell on Twitter. And Bernie Sanders, he's done, folks. He's cooked. Gave it a good run. But politicians lie all the time, and there's no such thing as a politician that isn't fibbing a little bit, because otherwise nothing would ever get done. You need to have a little bit of hyperbole and optimism, because once it was introduced, once you have one side playing rules for radicals, it turns out that if the other side doesn't play to some degree this rule for radical game, they're at a disadvantage. And that's just one, system of how to handle political strategy. So lying politicians, I mean, if they're a little bit wrong, I say, if we're really talking about, getting the stale skunk off of these politicians, I'd say at least if they're directionally accurate, if they're generally correct, I don't worry about the lies, because there's so much that happens, so much that changes. And the fact of the matter is, one other thing about politicians and lying is that sometimes a reporter will ask a point-blank question about foreign policy, or about where are we attacking next, or what's this strategic move? Can't you tell us what this next move is? And I say we're not going to give up our secrets to the entire world just because you think, and largely it's often for partisan reasons, that something is going on that you're unhappy with. We have to hold our politicians accountable, but they can't tell you everything that's going on in the boardroom, everything that's going on, in terms of getting strategic about war. And, persuasion works even better or even best when there are unknowns, there are implieds, there are actual concrete items as well on the chessboard, on the table. But if you reveal too much information, if you don't allow, and this goes for persuasion, if you don't allow people to imagine what could be, if you can't be scientifically exact, you have to create an image in people's heads and make them think about it, and make them question their values and think, well, what do I really want? Do I want this? Do I want that? That's what it's about. And you can't give people all the information. So yeah, that's lying politician. When you hear someone that doesn't understand that politicians lie, that's a sign they don't understand persuasion and maybe should study it, among other disciplines. Finally, we have female wage gap. Female wage gap. You'll often hear them say that women make 80 cents on the dollar compared to men. But Jordan Peterson actually, and look it up. Look it up. Do your research, I say. Seek subject matter experts. He actually has 16 different factors, 16 different vectors, 16 different situations that impact, factors that impact the wage gap. Now, women are at a great biological disadvantage when it comes to jobs. They bear children. Okay, even if you have a man, a stay-at-home dad, I'm just going to go through a couple of the different reasons why the female wage gap is a myth. Even if you have a stay-at-home dad, the woman has to stay out. Women can't work as long as men can. Men have a little bit more stamina. They also can't, and by that I don't mean that there are no women out there that can do the work for like 60 or 80 or 100 hours. There are certainly women that work over 100 hours, and I'm not sure how you pull it off, and I give you a lot of kudos for that. But I'm saying in general, it's a little bit more difficult for a woman to give up. You know, women don't really tend to have that men don't tend to have the biological clock as well. And men don't have to deal with the awfulness of the period. And there's all these different ways that men have a little bit more stamina. They have about 40% more upper body strength, and certain jobs, you don't see a lot of women working these engineering jobs, not the STEM. We want to get more women into STEM, but in terms of these like heavy lifting jobs, working on an oil rig, working as a construction worker, these are like high-end jobs that are essentially completely off limits to women. It puts them at a disadvantage. But there's a number of different reasons why women tend to go into fields that, and this is all generalization, so certainly leave me a comment below if you have any thoughts or observations on this particular point. But women tend to go into fields where they're dealing with people. And men seem to be more interested in things, in sciences. Again, speaking generally, not speaking in terms of specifics, specific people. Because Lord knows there are millions upon millions of men and women that do not fall into these, do not fall into the stereotypes or whatever it might be. They might be going against the trend. But the trend is that women prefer jobs where they're more social. They're dealing with people. There's a psychological element that they're working with people. And they're usually not solitary jobs. Whereas men have a tendency to seek more thing-based, okay? They're more obsessive. How many women do you know out there that are obsessive record collectors? There aren't many. There aren't as many. Again, the exceptions don't prove the rule. So you can certainly do your research on why the female wage gap is a myth. It's certainly not about sexism, at least, in general. There are cases, of course, where people are being paid different amounts for, sexist or otherist reasons, but in general, it's not the case. In fact, Milton Friedman, I actually watched a video recently with Milton Friedman talking about how, demanding that women always get equal pay for equal work is actually not good for the women. Because once women are truly equal, if there's any other consideration, the fact that they might need to have time off for example, maternity. If they need to have time off for any reason, they're at a disadvantage. Men don't need to take time off for the same reasons that women do. I consider this to be a little bit ineloquent on my part, but like I say, seek out more information. I don't believe in the wage gap. I think that women happen to choose careers that make a little less money, and they also have situation biologically that doesn't correlate directly with the male experience. Men have a little bit more leeway, and they can do things that women simply can't do physically, and some of these jobs happen to be rather more lucrative. So certainly look into it, but I think it's more of a political talking point to say there's a wage gap, to say like we need to do something. So take action, take this side here. Go with us, and we will heal the wage gap. But in good news, there are more women working now in the United States than ever before, and the wages are slowly increasing, largely for women and minorities. So that's also a good thing. So terms permeated with stale skunk. Okay, so it's getting a little bit dark out there, but you know what? We got one more tweet for you today, so stick around. All right. So here is a tweet, another named tweet today called Aesthetical Tokenism. Aesthetical Tokenism. Say that 5 times fast. And here we go. In a post-truth realm known as politics, accepting the constancy of hypocrisy will help one score tokens. There is no the truth, only an estimate based on limited information, often with disinformation and misinformation sprinkled in to persuade in a given direction. And then I hashtag it optics. So aesthetics, aesthetical tokenism, and optics. Okay. So, in the post-truth realm of politics, where anything goes, the rules are for radicals, as Saul Alinsky would say, if you don't accept the constancy of hypocrisy, like not understanding, if you think that one side or the other, may it be the Democrats or the Republicans, are always right, I'm sorry, but the truth lies between. And understanding that, pointing out hypocrisy on this side, or this side, or that side, or that side, wherever it might be, some people would tell you that that's not the strongest play. It's not the strongest play, because everybody is doing these things, and they're all pointing out hypocrisy to the point where, well, it becomes neutralized. Hypocrisy, whataboutism, these concepts are neutralized when it comes to politics, because everybody's got a little corruption. Every team has a little corruption. Every team has a couple of people saying the wrong thing and saying things that are offensive, or they're making microaggressions. Whatever it might be that they're doing, both sides are doing it. And so pointing out hypocrisy, well, it really helps if only one side is doing something. And this is where I think that the left, the American left, the Democrat left, you have your more neoliberal Democrats, and then you have your more democratic socialist Democrats, whatever Democrat it might be, your AOC plus 3, or your Nancy Pelosi, or Elizabeth Warren, whoever it might be. And then, of course, you have your Republicans, your Rand Paul. He's kind of an outlier. But you have your bitch McConnell. People call him Bitch McConnell on Twitter sometimes. But you have all these different people, Jim Jordan. And if you accept the constancy of hypocrisy, it'll help you score tokens. So, the aesthetical tokenism. There is no the truth, only an estimate based on limited information. So again, especially when you're dealing with political rhetoric in this post-truth realm, they're going to be sometimes directionally accurate. Okay, so they'll be able to say, well, I was mostly correct, I just got the numbers wrong, right? They'll use every technique in the book to persuade, to, some would say, manipulate, to get your vote. Okay? They're only largely, and this goes for the smarter politicians, they're only concerned with winning. They're only concerned with keeping their power. And yeah, they might have some policy goals. They might have some, ethical and moral concerns that are actually real. But largely, it's about, we have lobbyists, we have all these different people that are part of a conflict of interest in the government, and it's all about negotiating and making concessions and doing this and doing that. But there's a lot of hypocrisy, and once you realize that's neutral, that pointing out hypocrisy, will score you, points in the short term, but really, at the end of the day, it doesn't actually mean that much. It's just another round of the game, right? You realize there is no the truth. There is no absolute truth. And that goes not only for politics, but of course, that kind of occurs in a philosophical or metaphysical sense as well. We can never know the absolute truth. It might exist. Objective truth might exist. But we're stuck in our heads. We have a subjective view of reality. We see everything from a different perspective. Scott Adams calls it 2 movies on 1 screen. I view things differently than you view things, and that's impossible to avoid. So the truth is a little bit different for everybody. Your truth is different than my truth. Our truth is different from somebody else's truth, so on and so forth. So with politics, there is no absolute truth most of the time. A lot of these systems are so large. The political system, the economic system, trade, they're so big that, you know, at the end of the day, nobody really looks at the entire system, sees every cog moving, and understands everything that's going on. If they're talking in rhetoric, they're just trying to persuade largely to their team or to whatever goals they're looking to accomplish politically. And they could be great goals. They could be goals that help the American people or whichever country you're from. They can help the people. But again, it's only an estimate based on limited information. Just an estimate. And with politics, of course, you often have disinformation and misinformation thrown in there as well. And that helps persuade in a given direction. So somebody might try to smear somebody. And oftentimes, it's like the way reporting works. If somebody puts up a report that happens to be, you know, false or misleading, a lot of people will read the misleading report, and if there's a correction issued later, they're not going to look at that. They're not going to see it. They've already moved on to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. In fact, a lot of the people I talk to don't even look beyond the headlines or the leads. Of course, I do have a video coming up, but I did a tweet video not too long ago when I talked a little bit about pro tips for the post-truth world, or post-truth pro tips, which can help you determine how fake news works if you're not privy to that knowledge already. So it is largely about optics. It's about the way things look, because sometimes people, like, for example, here's a great example, just talking about this past week, when Adam Schiff went ahead and gave his parody version of the whistleblower call. Now, he very clearly said it was parody. Adam Schiff did a good thing by saying at the end it was parody. But just by, you know, using this parody, you know, using fake words out of Trump's mouth, putting fake words into President Trump's mouth, a lot of people are just going to look at that one, you know, that they're not going to know it's parody. They'll just see what the snippet they saw in the news, the soundbite. And if they're not paying enough attention, even if he said it was parody and they miss it, they will potentially, many people, dozens, hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions, will make decisions based on sort of misinformation, disinformation. Misinformation is when you have bad information. Disinformation is when somebody intentionally spread misinformation. They call it disinformation for a disinformation campaign. So you want to keep in mind that optics matter. The truth, it might seem like the truth matters in politics. It might seem that way. But it's a post-truth realm. Optics matter. And that's why I say study persuasion, pay attention to linguistics, and if you're really interested in politics, check out these different disciplines, these different skills to add to your stack, and I think you'll have a better time. So that's all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. And as I always say, everything I said today might be right. Or everything I said today might be wrong. Or perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. I think that's more correct. So if you enjoyed the content today, please do hit like and subscribe Tap that little bell for notifications on YouTube and BitChute, of course. Leave me a comment below with your thoughts, observations, accolades, and criticisms. And if you didn't enjoy the video, or if you had a beef with me on Twitter and you want to get some revenge, hit the downvote button so I know whether my content is good or bad. That's meritocracy. Let me know. It'll do me a service. But I do appreciate any upvotes I get. Definitely helps with the algorithm. Of course, I am at RealJeffTidwell on Twitter. I'm also on Minds, Gab, Parler, Telegram, Instagram. And if you're not watching this video on YouTube, you're watching it on BitChute. I had a great time tonight, and I look forward to seeing you again. And I guess that's about enough for today. So I'll see you next time. Have a good night.